let's talk about some Deadlands fiction. These are the first three dime novels. The gimmick was they're half story, half role-playing game adventure. Not talking about the latter, already talked about that. This is just about the fiction side, and these are Perdition's Daughter, Independence Day, and I can be screwing this up. Night Train. They're about Ronan Lynch, a gunslinger in a Wild West that has gone weird and is full of monsters. It's fantasy western, therefore horror western in terms of the monsters, but compared to Dead Man's Road, it doesn't trade too heavily on that. There's a lot of slasher fic about it in that sense of just like, let's go and it's very pulpy. Go and fight some Nosferatu on a steam train. It's the Wild West meets something like Dead Man's Road. Much closer to the kind of Xenia vibe. It's about Ronan Lynch, as I say. He is a gunslinger with some things that go on around him that get him involved in the weirdness of the West. And in one, he's fighting an evil cult. In the second, there's some sort of magically empowered serial killer. And in the third, there's a steam train full of vampires. Right, they're all great high concept ideas. The fact you can describe them like that, and you're like, that sounds cool. That sounds cool. Now, the 90s were an interesting time. There've been some fiction since, Deadlands fiction since. There is in Deadlands books, there's usually fiction, and always has been. There was a novel 13 years ago, I think. I've not read it, I'm afraid. These were the first fiction from more or less publication onwards. The first story is by Shane Lacy Hensley, Perdition's Daughter. Independence Day is by Matt Forbeck. And Night Train is by John Goff. So, you've got three different writers. There were 9 of the Weird West series. There were 3 of the follow-up post-apocalyptic Hell on Earth, Wasted West series. There was a novel, actually. It wasn't a dime novel, but just a straight novel for the Way Out West in Space series. And then there are a few for Deadlands Noir, which obviously is 1920s, 30s, 40s detective stuff. Noir fiction. I've not read all of those by any means. But yes, these were the first 3. This came out pretty close to release, I think. And they're fun. The main thing is they're fun. And they fit into a tradition of tie-in fiction from the 80s and 90s and noughties for role-playing games, starting with Dungeons & Dragons, Quad Keep by Andre Norton, big name, apparently quite bad novel. Gary Gygax wrote his own, the Gord the Thief stuff. And then you get the Forgotten Realms stuff. Kate Novak and Jeff Grubb, Douglas Niles, Ed Greenwood, and most famously R.A. Salvatore, who's really the one who's come through all that and made a legend out of it, a legend of Drizzt, if you will. So this was not just important for D&D, also for World of Darkness. Massive, you could get stuff that if you wanted to know what was actually happening in the meta plot, you had to go and buy the books. Shadowrun had a very well-respected run of novels to start off with. I'm thinking, what other... Exalted had some fiction. The Star Wars D6, that doesn't count because that was just Star Wars fiction. Certainly anything that was a non-original IP, I guess it doesn't count. But you had lots of stuff where this tied in. World of Darkness feels like the most obvious one in some ways to me because it's so important. And again, it's incredibly prolific. You could just buy dozens of these books. For some of these lines, you'd have 8 fiction books a year coming out or something mad. But Deadlands wasn't quite so prolific. But these are solid. They are fun. They have these great high concepts. They vary in quality. I think Night Train by John Goff is the best, in which, they're always good at getting stuff. Partly you recognise it as they're showing game concepts, and maybe that's kind of cheesy. But it is fun here. You end up with a mad scientist driving a steam wagon after a train full of vampires. And that's, it's a good visual. It just works. And, in another one, you have, there's a witch and she's firing bolts, and there's a, guy, a preacher who's blessed by God and stuff like that. In this final battle with the cult where everyone's going crazy. like there's just good scenes. I think of those, Goff just has the tightest writing, the least obvious kind of, okay, let's just try to establish a thing about the setting or the game or the universe, and I think pulls off those big prestiges the best. And none of them are absolute top tier writers, but then these are 30 or 40 page stories, and they're quite easy and quick to read, and they are very fun, and they will give you a sense of the universe, and if you're interested in that side of it. But even if you're like, oh, I just like fantasy westerns, I'll read one of these, you're not going to be like, that was a waste of time. I think you will find them enjoyable. If you have read them, I'd love to, or anything in the Deadlands kind of series, I'd love to know what you think in the comments, because I don't know who else ever has read Deadlands fiction. But yes, I think they are fun. You can get them for varying prices on eBay. This is the bigger question. There are Kindle versions, that's probably the cheapest way, and that's just the fiction, not the RPG stuff. But you can get the hard copies for £5 to £15 on eBay, so they're not crazy to get if you're interested. Anyway, I will leave that there. You tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.